diversity means a thorough embrace and respect and inclusion of difference, and difference not being rendered deficiency or deficient. So as a scholar and as a teacher, what I hope to do is try to introduce these different ideas to my students through acknowledging that my students actually come to the classroom with plenty of knowledge. The role of me as a scholar is to help ensure that they're using their knowledge production to actually embrace the difference around them. And ideally for me as a scholar, I'm trying to embrace or nurture students who want to create a better world, who want to continue to push for a world where inclusion and difference are central core values and they're not something that can be reduced or tokenized to a photo op. And so for me, diversity requires that as a scholar, I'm constantly pushing my students to even sometimes unlearn some of the negative internalizations we have around difference and some of the negative understandings we have around people who are different.
For me, my commitment to diversity is really grounded in just understanding that historically marginalized communities, their experiences are legitimate sources of knowledge, and that their experiences can tell us something about these larger concepts about race, about democracy, about deindustrialization, about who we are as Americans. And I express that commitment in the voices I bring into the classroom, how I bring those voices into the classroom. And what I mean by that is I use my oral history interviews not just in the research, because who knows who's going to see this for a while, but I also use them in the classroom. And so we're having a conversation about Black power or about quality public education. I want my students to hear from people who lived through this moment and recognize that their experiences can actually tell us something about who we are. But I think also teaching students to also see that they have experiential knowledge. And so that their experiences leading up to this moment can tell them something about race in America, about change over time, about all of these things we think about as scholars.
So my commitment to diversity, I think, revolves around a question that is not only part of my dissertation, my research, but just in terms of my pedagogy, which is what kinds of lives are worth living. And so in my research, this has to do with the question of the ways that people of color have been deemed unworthy of life, right? How people with disabilities has also been seen as unworthy of life. How could you keep living in this condition? And so when I'm in the undergraduate classroom, one of my sort of most rewarding experiences has been teaching pre-medical students, because of course I study disability and illness, and having these pre-medical students come in with a sort of very clear-cut binary sense of this is what it means to be healthy, this is what it looks like, and this is what it means to be ill. But then by the end of the semester, they're sort of thinking, wait a minute, there's a whole other way to be embodied. There are people who may have a body that's different than mine, but they still have a sense of autonomy. And so for me, that's one way that I try to teach my students about what diversity means, that it's not only the sort of people of color or sort of women, groups that we are more used to considering, but also different types of bodies, any kind of body that is different from your own. They may live in a world or in a society that doesn't always consider them first, that doesn't always see them as the future college student, but that they can take ownership and see themselves where they want to be in the future.